Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Empowered Hour. My name is Iamote Tashainen Church, and I'm an empowerment coach in the Hawaiian Islands. I am here today with Lauren Taylor. Lauren, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
And Lauren is a specialist in the empowerment self-defense field, among other things, which we're going to talk about during the session. And Lauren, would you just tell a little bit about you and the work that you do for the audience?
So I'm based in Washington, D.C., where I grew up. I started working on gender-based violence when I was a co-founder of DC's first shelter in 1978. I took my first self-defense class in the mid-'80s and started learning to teach almost right after that. I quit my day job in 1997 to found Defend Yourself, and I've been with a team. I've been teaching empowerment self-defense ever since.
That's amazing. And you have a couple of other ventures. I saw Safe Bar was something that you spearheaded. Could you share a little bit about that as well?
So yeah, it actually came up in an empowerment self-defense class that somebody in the class had heard about a bystander program for bartenders, and out of that mention grew Safe Bars, which now nationally teaches people who work in all kinds of hospitality venues, including bars, restaurants, breweries, distilleries, clubs, concert venues, bystander intervention skills, with the goal of changing industry culture to be safer and more welcoming for all.
Covers the gambit. um, what brought you into a self-defense class? I know that everybody has their reasons. What was the first reason for you?
I was in my 20s and I had saved up a bunch of money and I was going to go traveling by myself. And I had a friend who had just taken a self-defense class and she mentioned it. And so I just thought, oh, that would be really good to do before I took a class, before I started traveling.
That's awesome.
That was about how well thought out it was.
Did you have to use any of those skills when you were on your travels?
I feel like I always was being strategic and aware and thoughtful. And yeah, I remember one time when I was walking alone in a city that I was very unfamiliar with, and I certainly didn't speak the language. I remember pulling out a pen to hold in my hand in case I needed to use it to hurt somebody with. I remember, so for a while, while on my travels, I stayed in one place for a while, and I had a job, and I was sexually harassed at my job, and basically the guy told me, you know, I'll raise your pay and you can stay longer if you get involved with me or have sex with me. And I told him no. So definitely yes, use my skills on the trip.
That's good. Wow. That's awful. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for your experience, but I'm glad that you turned it around and you wrote a book. You actually put it all in here.
Yes. With Nadia Telsey.
It's yeah. I know that sometimes I feel like everybody has a really good book in them. But how long have you been working on this book?
Oh, I almost hate to say. I mean, uh, I think Nadia turned it over to me in about 2016. I didn't really get working on the proposal until maybe 2017 or 18. And then I didn't really start writing the book until we had a book contract and thus a deadline. And once we had a book contract and thus a deadline, I was like every minute writing, researching, editing, writing. So
Yeah.
that was probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, a lot happened in between that time. So I feel like you get a pass. Can you share a little bit about the book for people?
Sure. So Get Empowered A Practical Guide to Thrive, Heal, and Embrace Your Confidence in a Sexist World. I know that's a mouthful, but it really is, it is a book with a lot in it. So I kind of feel like it can easily be broken down into two kinds of things that are in it. One is understanding why there is gender-based violence, and what function it serves in society. Because if we just published a book that taught people how to set boundaries and be more confident, it would be like a million other self-help books out there, right? Which are, yes, helpful or less helpful, I'm not going to judge. But I feel like for people to be able to sharing an understanding of why gender-based violence exists and what its function is in society can free readers of their own shame and self-blame. I feel like there's we're all, I think we're more common conversation is those of us who are targeted for gender-based violence, which is primarily women and LGBTQIA plus people, often hold a lot of shame and self-blame for the violence that was done to us, whether it is a large act of violence like a sexual assault or a small intrusion, like the habit men have of putting their hands on a woman's back when they move through a crowd, or of talking over women in family groupings or in meetings or whatever. No matter what degree of gender-based violence it is, those of us who are targeted often blame ourselves. And everywhere out in the world, pretty much, you can now find, especially now that the Me Too movement was re-sparked in 2017, you can find pretty good access to the fact that it is not your fault. If someone chooses to harass, abuse, or attack you, it is not your fault. We still have trouble holding that in our hearts.
Mhm.
If I went out and asked a crowd of women and LGBTQIA plus people, whose fault is it? They would all say the fault of the person who does it. But they would still think things like, I should have done this differently, or why not yell one more time, or why did I go with them? There's all these things that put the onus on ourselves. But what the book does is it goes one more level, which it is not your fault if you were not as assertive or as confident as you want to be. It's not your fault if you were, if you didn't speak up or if you didn't react the way you planned. It is not your fault if you froze. And so it's not just your fault that the thing happened, but it's also not your fault that you were unable to respond the way you might have liked to. And that is also because of gender-based violence and gender socialization. So that whole piece that I just summarized there, and I hope it made sense because I'm moving pretty quickly, is one huge part of the book. And I feel like the point of that is to take the burden off of us that we are carrying around our shame and self-blame. The other part of the book is, how are we going to develop the skills that we wish we had had? And how are we going to put down the shame and self-blame? And how are we going to, there's more, but I'm not thinking of it right now. How are we going to shape ourselves into the people we would like to be? Not just in the realm of gender-based violence, but by putting down the shame and self-blame and the fear, etc., we have a lot more space to become the people we want to be and to be more authentically ourselves. So
absolutely,
that's a long way of answering what the book is about, but it's a complicated book.
No, and I really love the angle of it, talking about it. I think that a lot of people, if you're already watching this, you seem to have an understanding of empowerment self-defense, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily know when it comes to self-defense what that even means. Or, you were talking about who's at fault. I think that we question ourselves a lot if it doesn't have to do with a physical act or physical touching. Where is the line? If I'm at work and someone makes a low jab at me in a meeting, who predominantly talks over me and is of the opposite sex, what is it? Where is that? Is that something where I'm being violated? So I'm just curious for you to explain a little bit more about that for audiences that maybe are questioning, is it me? Is there something wrong with me? Or did I do something to deserve this?
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the people who are watching this, and I can safely say the answer is no. It is not you, and you did not do something to deserve this.
Yeah.
We're all imperfect. We all make mistakes all the time, but that doesn't mean we deserve to be disrespected or treated like less than, or, talked over, or, any one of those things. Yeah, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. There's no situation in which it could be your fault.
Awesome. Thank you. One of the parts that I really love, because a lot of times when I go to lots of other self-defense classes because I want to add to my toolkit of everything that I have. And I love that you're adding in the feeling aspect. How are you feeling?
Oh, yeah.
There's the feelings wheel that you have inside. I have her book, folks. Definitely get it. But there's the feelings wheel in here. And it explains all of these different sections. So, for sad, it says guilty, ashamed, depressed, lonely, bored, tired. And so I think that we don't necessarily always clump those together or put them together and connect all the dots of, why am I feeling this way? What is the reasoning for it? And you add in a lot about self-care. And I think that people need to understand that that's intricately connected to the part of healing after the fact. Would you mind talking a little bit about that and the importance of it?
I have another thought in my head talking about,
Share it.
and I don't want to forget the other thought, so
Yes,
I can
of
do
course.
it. Okay. So my other thought is, talking about the fact that a lot of people who follow you know a lot about empowerment self-defense and might even be empowerment self-defense teachers. Like, just because we know a lot about it, we've taken classes, or we're actually teachers of it, doesn't mean that this stuff comes easy to us, right? And in fact, it might be precisely because it is difficult for us that we've chosen this work, right? I often find myself saying we teach what we need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I certainly know that one of the reasons I teach is that it gives me a way to constantly practice and constantly learn in these realms. And I think of a class that I taught to about 65 empowerment self-defense teachers a couple summers ago that you may have been at. And I got so much feedback from that class where people were like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better because I thought I needed to be perfect at this and I'm so not perfect at it. But
Oh,
we don't have to be perfect at it. All we have to do is show up with some questions and some information and facilitate a dialogue,
mm-hmm.
right? And people will benefit from it.
Yeah, and we're constantly evolving too.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
That's important because there's a lot of self-blame that goes on, and in this industry it is interesting, just because I think that there's this thought that if you do this work then you're in the know of everything, or that you have this understanding, and it would never happen to you. I know that
No wrong.
constantly I have to, constantly I have to uh, flex my skills, utilize my skills. I've taught at parks, before, and I've had guys come in and want to teach my class because they teach martial arts, and it's interesting to have that kind of conversation and be able to practice as an instructor and say, I hear that you're a specialist. How would you feel if somebody came into your class and wanted to take over? What would come up? Um, I
Beautiful way of handling it. I love that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It actually, he just sort of was like, well, and then he walked away. um,
One
yeah.
of the reasons I don't like to teach outside.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, with our situation here, it's kind of like parks are the area that we
Right.
have available at this
That makes
point.
sense.
But yeah, no, I like definitely teaching inside in a safe space for people. Um, you know, I really love, so it has different scenarios here. Someone cuts you off in traffic and drives too close to you. So like just kind of gauging the different feelings that come up.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think we necessarily ask ourselves, you know, how that relates to self-defense, but I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and the importance of understanding these little connections. The other one below that is someone at your job or school stands too close when they talk to you. um
So this part of the book really comes out of my life experience, having grown up in a family where we weren't allowed to have feelings. But I'll walk it back. Okay, so in order to say what's okay with you and what's not okay with you, and to ask for what you want, you have to know how you're feeling. And so I'm not the only one who has grown up without an emotional fluency, right? So in order to know how you're feeling, you need to know what the word is for that feeling, right? Like I might feel something in my body, but if I can't tell if it's shame or excitement, that's not very helpful. Right? So that's one reason for the feelings wheel that you brought out there. Um, and in order to know what the word is for the feeling, you need to know what the sensation is in your body that goes with that feeling. So that's the reason that we have that exercise with that somebody cuts you off in traffic and somebody stands too close to you and a whole bunch of other situations, where I'm just trying to help people who might have some of the same challenges that I do get to the point where they're able to say, you know, this makes me feel, or when this happens, I feel unhappy. I feel whatever it is I might feel. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to let me finish my sentence. I want you to show up on time when you say you will. I want you to not put your hand on me without checking first, whatever it is. Um, so it's a long path from like knowing what the feeling is in your body to being able to say what you want.
yeah, just imagine if everybody actually had those skills. Probably a lot of marriages would be saved, or
Yes.
a lot of marriages would have ended early.
Right. It's true. Both of those things.
Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is not working. Yeah. Yeah. And I love, you talk about your worth defending.
Mhm.
This hits home so much for me because I think that, when you go through life and you're just a very introverted person and you try and do everything that you can to maneuver and make sure like you're just doing everything right. If you do something that you feel is wrong, there's just this huge punishment that you do. I noticed another section was tame the critic, the inner critic.
Mhm.
And I think that we're all culprits of this, whether we say like, oh no, I conquered this. It comes up,
Yes.
you know, maybe
Negative self-talk.
Yeah, maybe it came up with writing the book. I know that I'm
Oh,
writing,
yeah.
sometimes I'm like, wait a second. But talking about you are worth defending. Share a little bit about that for you. If there was an experience that maybe you had, or an aha with a student, what do you have to share?
I have two things that I want to say. One is, yes, I had negative self-talk while I was writing the book, and I was very conscious, especially when I was writing the section on negative self-talk and having negative self-talk, of like the irony of that, but that's reality. I also think that you don't have to be an introvert to carry a lot of um, you know, negative self-talk, or punish yourself for perceived mistakes or whatever. And especially for anybody who grew up with parents who really were not up to the job, and especially if you had caregivers who were abusive or neglectful, it's going to be even harder to get out of that trap. So that's one of the reasons that we do lean so hard on you being worth defending, and why we lean so hard, like you talked about earlier, on the self-help, the self-care exercises, because even though we make the book fun and it's positive, you can see results right away when you're working with it. We're still talking about hard things, and we need to acknowledge that and give people tools for coping with that while they're working with the book.
Yeah, true. I think that anytime you're going through sort of a healing process, or you're learning something new in this related field, there are different moments that can trigger something, and those come up. Um, I know that for myself, just looking at some of the different chapters, certain things came up for me of past times when I was at a martial arts school and I experienced sexual harassment or abuse there, and I just kept on thinking, if I'm nice enough,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm nice enough, they won't do this to me. Or if they respected me enough, then this wouldn't happen. And I think that this is just such an important piece that so many of us have. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think there are two things. One is that if I'm nice enough or good enough or try hard enough or whatever, then they will fill in the blanks, some kind of treat me better, right? First of all, that's 100% our gender socialization, right? We're, girls, not saying that boys are totally exempt from this, but girls are taught to prioritize being nice and kind and compliant, and all of those kinds of things. That's where our value lies. Our value also lies in our beauty and our prettiness, but our value lies in what we can do for others. And so that's what we're going to go to when we want something to be different. If you want people in your martial arts school to stop sexually harassing you, not all of us, some of us had different training, but a lot of us are going to go to, like, if I just, if I'm kind enough, they'll see me as another human and they will treat me like a human and not like someone to be disrespected.
Yeah.
Were there
It
any other words about
it
what you
ebbs
asked?
and flows. No, I mean, I think you covered it. I think that it is something where we have been programmed to just be as nice and as kind as possible, as obedient, and
Compliant.
compliant, don't talk back, those different things, which is hard at as you're going through the ranks at a martial arts school and you're suddenly becoming an instructor, that, like, if a student's yelling at you who's a man, there's just different things that you have to kind of work with.
But
um,
the power system in martial arts totally plays into this, right? Because it's so hierarchical. and you can't question anybody who's above you. And if somebody above you is being abusive, that's part of your training. Like, the whole, there's a reason it's called martial arts, right?
Yeah.
The whole system is, except in some schools and styles, the whole system is based on some kinds of mistreatment.
Yeah.
And no individual has enough power to change that in their school, wherever they're training.
I feel like there's a huge connection between that and sports and athletes. A lot of people
Right.
who are in the athletic realm, your coach is talking to you. You don't question the coach. You don't talk back to the coach. But if
Do
it's
whatever they say, even if it's not okay for you or your body.
yeah, and most of the time in girls' sports, it's usually a male coach that you're
Yep.
working with. So there's just that dynamic. I know I played soccer, and I would have some coaches that would say certain things, and looking back, I'm like, was that sexual harassment? Yes. um, and so it's amazing what girls our age have to go through. Just thinking back to you as a child, I'm wondering if you had a piece of advice to say to that child who is experiencing what she was experiencing. What could you say to her? um
I would say, you know, you are enough and you're worth defending, and you you're 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 a wonderful person just how you are, and you could stop trying so hard. Um, I mean, I am a people pleaser and I do want everybody to like me, right? And that's what was my coping mechanism for when I was young, and I've been healing from that and transforming that my whole adult life, but it's not like it's totally gone.
yeah.
So if I had gotten that message early on, if somebody had said to me, you're wonderful, and you know, just keeping yourself, that would have been led me to a totally different life.
Yeah, it's amazing just the impact that that one piece could actually do. I there was a part of my childhood where I was overweight, and they had an assignment where you had to draw yourself, and I feel like when you're drawing yourself, you're your worst critic. So um the teacher who came up to me, she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, you're more prettier. You're much more prettier than that." And that was a huge thing for me, where I just kind of looked up, and I kind of looked at the picture, and I remember going home and just kind of staring at myself in the mirror, like, what does she see? What is
Mm,
that? What is
that's
that?
so profound.
Yeah. Yeah. um and nowadays, gosh, there's so many changes. I had my girls program in middle school, and they have so many different things that we did not have to deal with. Did not have to deal with at
On
all.
social media,
Oh my
dick pics.
gosh. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. All of these things. um the fights that they get into, it's like certain topics that I would never have even imagined or thought of in middle school, when I was in middle school. I'm just curious, with the new climate, with everything from gender-based violence, talking about um, all different sexual orientations, and looking at it from this spectrum. Is there advice that you would give to youth out there right now who are just going through it?
I almost want to say, I think I want to say that I want to tell them the same thing I told my younger self,
Yeah.
because um, even though in some ways they have a lot more um, assertiveness and confidence sometimes, and sometimes like I remember things like I'll be teaching middle schoolers, for example, and they'll be, I'll be talking about abuse in relationships and they'll be like, oh, duh, we already know all about that, right? Um, um, so even though they're much more savvy and, you know, and, and sometimes more able to stand up for themselves, I still see the same trouble saying no, the same if wanting everybody to like them in some girls, right? There are some girls, depending on the culture they grow up in, um, who do have parents and caregivers who are saying to them, like, you know, go ahead and talk back. But I still think that gender socialization by and large is, you know, don't piss anybody off and just, get them, if they like you, they'll treat you well.
Yeah, true. True. Yeah. I mean, most of the students that I've had, except for like the last program, they were pretty, uh, gutsy. They were very outspoken, which I thought was great. I really love this book. I love that you made it, you published it. I would love to have just a couple of pieces that if someone out there is looking for empowerment, what do they get out of reading this book? What are their takeaways?
I hope that, like I referred to earlier, that they understand on a deeper level that is not your fault if someone harasses, abuses, and attacks you. They understand it not only in their head but also in their heart. I also hope that they understand that the if they didn't respond the way they wanted to, that also is not their fault. Um, and the other takeaway I would like them to have is to spend some time even making a list of times when you have advocated for yourself or set a limit. And it could be something very small, like, um, you know, I'd like an extra helping of ketchup. It could be a telemarketer, don't call me again, put me on your do not call list. But even the smallest things, if we ignore those, we can't build on them. I want to notice them so that then we can build to doing things that are more and more challenging. And so we have a lot of exercises around that in the book, but even if you don't get the book, you can just make a list of times you've set limits or advocated for yourself. And like give yourself some respect around that.
Yeah, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. People talk about that all the time, where it's just this little tiny thing of like they just said this, that was it. But it was all the little tiny microaggressions and things
Right.
that added up to that. Well, how do people find your book?
There are so many ways to find the book. Probably the easiest is we have a website, which is called getempoweredbook.com. Very straightforward, getempoweredbook.com. And if you go there, you will find, you can buy it in all the places that you buy books, from your big booksellers like Amazon and Barnes and Nobles to your small local booksellers. There's something called bookshop.org. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but if you click on that, it will send the book to you from your local independent bookseller, no matter who they are. And that's a way of supporting your local independent bookseller, which I think is a wonderful thing to do.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we'll have links. I will ask Lauren to send me links, and I will have those in the description for all of you so that you can find her book, find the right location for you to get her book. Yeah. And then check out her social media and everything. Lauren, is there anything else you wanted to share?
I wanted to say that one of the other reasons that we wrote this book, especially I want to say this because there are so many ESD teachers or other ESD fans on this who watch this, one of the reasons we wrote this book is, or this is my goal, I don't want to speak for Nadia, to reach more people than we could all ever reach together in our classrooms.
Yes.
I really hope it gets out there and it stays out there, and like, the next generation is getting it for the next generation. Unfortunately, we're not solving this problem anytime soon. So this book is hopefully going to be around for a while. And it's useful in your classrooms. It's useful for people who can never get in an ESD classroom for whatever reason. So that's one of my hopes for the book.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank
It was,
you.
yes. Aloha, everyone.